It's somebody, some of the things are.
It-
Sections.
Yeah.
And it's art. But it, oh,
Try and get this up.
oh, that's not a full screen.
No.
I'm getting. And the zoom out.
Yeah. Preparing live stream, but it's not going. It's not connected to the camera.
So, yeah.
All right, let me do that after. Rain. Move these two.
I'm speaking.
Which two you want? Two chairs in the corner. Yeah, I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna use it all. I don't want to do it. Well, in all. Let's check it.
Yes, yes. That's the answer, yes, yes. And then the speed, but it. She never had. She never. Yes, yes. Yeah.
You see another extent.
Just trying to get it out.
It's hard now. To go from the that to this.
What for the all?
Yeah.
Here. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. A lot of people said, oh, they were singing for the first time today.
I'm the one time I send this out. Current, oh, the email people, that's good too.
That is what you keep on here.
I think I'm picking up your old list.
Yeah.
Oops, I just turned it on.
Oh, is it? No.
It's just we're not picking up this. That's why.
No, I was actually, I'm looking for the camera. See here, camera's connected. Integrated webcam. Related settings.
Is it back on?
Wait, no. Camera is on. I was looking for something. See if I could still pick it back.
No. We're doing it now is.
You never give me enough time. I was setting up the
Yeah.
phone.
Turn the
It's another one.
No, I'm in turn. I go street.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, together.
Alvin, just go up front coming up and do some sound checks to me.
With the mic?
Yeah. So why? Yes. Everybody. Go on, so to say also.
What side?
Okay, that is not showing on the. So it's live stream, but I'm not seeing any live stream.
I mean, it's not like.
I'm not seeing inside there.
Story.
It's clean one. It's the Zoom.
All right, so I'm gonna ask people to move to, yeah. And we're gonna start. Start at 6:15. What?
Oh, no, later because it was 6 o'clock. Right?
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
I was going to my speech.
No, I just. Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul. I mean, no assumption that everybody watching here who I am. And I extend a warm welcome to all who here with us, present at the headquarters, and those online. Admitting today's reenactment cannot be considered your feedback. Admittedly, today's reenactment cannot be considered a complete and balanced reenactment and history lesson. This reenactment presents Richard Hart's theme, which for me is an honest, fair, objective, and balanced view of the events used in the special conference in March 1952. Well, look at picture here. In Richard Hart's book, he says he gives the theme on March 29. And Leroy is not certain, but it was conference started on Saturday, March 29. But we're not actually here to see. But he writes in the book, and I expect again to be Saturday 29. In preparing for this event, I've been amazed and overwhelmed with the number of party members who know nothing at all about that historic 1952 conference, about which effect and for the first time. What also struck out was the civility, if not mutual respect, in the exchange of letters between heart and non-mind. These letters were exchanged after the conference and hearts departed by the capital heart, without rancor dealing with it. There's no better person at the place in context than Leroy Cook, who came into the party in the late 1960s and was tasked to organize youth organization. I first met another student in early 1969, responding to a meeting with the then newly elected JP President Michael Manley. He was former deputy general secretary in the mid-1970s. He was also the author of Land of My Birth, a sketch of the PFP and Jamaican political history during the party's first 40 years. To read Richard Hart's piece in Alwyn Scott, who albeit the late notice, consented without hesitation, take up the task. He's somewhat different in complexion than Richard Hart. But today we are paying attention, content, and substance. To extend reaches and that the National Party is the party chair with Anthony Burke. He would have been part of that region group. The pictures and tape buried somewhere in my human hand, which met with comrade Richard Hart after the fellowship of this board, and which is graciously accepted at the party's 60th annual conference, 1998. Comrade Roman.
Thank you very much, Comrade Burke. And I first want to really tell all of that to the audience of this particular evening. I was at a recent political education session, just looking at some of the achievements over the years. And I was amazed at the response of many of the participants, many of whom were leaders level of the party, and their expressed ignorance, lack of knowledge of some of the things that they're doing. And even for things that we knew, just putting it in context. So I suspect that this evening we will know this. I wanted to start off with from the right of the Marcus. And I quote, a people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. We don't normally go further than that, but it also considers that trees that are not firmly rooted in a rich, fertile soil do not grow. They do not bear fruit. They cannot withstand a strong wind or bear heavy roots. And I believe that going back to the history, looking at it, that it could help us understand the meaning. If that is happening, I am hoping that we take it one step further and indulge in a little reflection on what we would have seen and witnessed here today. And one of the simplest frameworks of reflection that I really like, because it's simple, is to move through what they call three events. That is looking at the experience, interpretation, and what that means for the future, what we take for the future. And so I'm hoping that what we do today is not simply a rehashing of the statements made by Congress, rather that it is a food for reflection, for us to see what are the lessons from the past that we can take into the future to ensure that as Congress and as a family, we are stronger than.
Thank you, Comrade. And I know asked Leroy to give us some context of that being in my 71 years old. I would have been alive, but not yet born. I was born 2 months after.
1952 special conference at the War Theatre took place 13 years after the foundation of the party at the same venue. The PNP had been the first of Jamaica's still active party, but it was not yet in government. PNP was formed as a middle-class party. This was clearly stated in the first editorial of Public Opinion newspaper, and can be seen in the nature of the 5 founding organizations of the party: Public Opinion newspaper, National Reform Association, Jamaica Progressive League, Jamaica Union of Teachers, and the Kingston and St. Andrew Federation of Citizens Association. But the working class uprising of May to June 1938 was the trigger that led Norman Manley to call for volunteers to set up a labor committee, which led to the formation of the PNP 3 months later. The PNP's successful campaign for universal adult suffrage by 1943 meant that it was essential to gain the support of the working class. If you imagine that the PNP and the VIPs were the political and trade union arms of the people working together in a common struggle. But Ouster had split off in 1942, and the PNP had lost the 1944 election. The TUC, Trade Union Congress, replaced Ouster's union as the labor arm of the party. 1946 asylum strike called by the TUC showed the PNP's growing strength among the masses on the street. So we come to the 4 H's, whose name, surname all started with H. These were all TUC leaders and PNP executive members. They were the link between the middle class and workers. They got the name 4 H's when they were detained by the governor in November 1942. And some clever journalists thought they reminded him of the 4-H movement of young farmers. So who were they? 4 H's. Number 1, Arthur Henry was the oldest, the most proletarian, black, a mechanic at the railway and later on ships. In 1939, he formed the Negro Workers' Education League and affiliated it to the PNP. This enabled the PNP to have a presence in Western Kingston and Southwestern St. Andrew after Ouster supporters had been breaking up PNP public meetings. In 1952, Arthur Henry was the financial secretary of the TUC. Number 2, Ken Hill, co-founder of the National Reform Association, along with Noel Nelson. He was a journalist, pioneer trade unionist, former vice president of the BITU, an eloquent speaker. He was president of the TUC, second vice president of the PNP, MHR for Kingston West, and mayor of Kingston. Number 3, Frank Hill, Ken Hill's younger brother, also a journalist. He was co-founder of Public Opinion newspaper, O.T. Fairclough. He was the party's chief organizer in Cornwall, where the PNP had increased its number of seats from 0 out of 10 in 1944, 3 out of 10 in 1949. Number 4, Richard Hart. He was the youngest. In 1938, when the party was formed, he was 19. In 1952, he was not yet 33. He was the son of a prominent lawyer, Ansel Hart, a principal of the law firm Mantle and Hart. Richard Hart was a lawyer himself, a solicitor. He was the intellectual leader of the group, and he was first vice president of the team. But within the TUC, a resolute minority opposed the 4 H's. This minority included Glassford, the secretary of the teams. For example, in 1946, Glassford's indiscipline set off the asylum strike prematurely, though the TUC rescued him and turned a potential disaster into a great victory. 1949, Glassford threatened to resign in disagreement with the union's decision not to withdraw from the World Federation of Trade Unions. The 4 H's were leaders of a group of PNP members which called itself the Left. They discussed ideas and tried to influence parties and disagreement with the union's decision. So, Four H's were leaders of a group of PNP members who called itself the Left. They discussed ideas and tried to influence parties and the system. Four H's were leaders of a group of PNP.
Continue. 4 H's were leaders of a group of PNP members which called itself the Left. They discussed ideas and tried to influence party policy in a coordinated way. After N.W. Manley persuaded the PNP to declare itself a socialist party in 1940, they became the chief teachers and propagandists within the party. Apart from Ken Hill, they mostly stayed in the background or bowed to the party's wishes when required tactically. For example, in 1940, the Nethersoles by-election for the St. Andrews seat in the House, they stayed in the background as requested by the party leaders at the time. And in 1949, when the party requested the TUC to withdraw from the World Federation of Trade Unions, they went along reluctantly. The Gleaner attacked them and tried to use them to divide the PNP. But Norman Manley defended them. Regarding a speech N.W. Manley gave in 1947, Rex Netherford has this to say. Despite criticism from members of his own party that he was the prisoner of men of wild spirit, meaning left-wingers, Manley gave a strong defense of these young men with ideas, who, he said, were seized with a burning fire against the evil conditions of poverty, hunger, and the degradation of man. He saw their extremism transforming itself like the atomic bomb into a power for good. By 1951, the PNP had been gaining strength in the country, and the left had been gaining strength within the party. Local government elections of 1951 showed that the PNP now had greater support among the electorate than the JLP,
and that this support was broadly distributed across the island. Of the total number of successful candidates in those elections, the PNP accounted for 77 compared to 53 for the JLP and 60 independents. The PNP got a greater number of elected candidates than the JLP on 8 of the 13 parochial boards or councils. In the corporate area, the PNP maintained its control and elected Ken Hill as mayor of the capital city. In other parishes, by a combination of outright superiority and support from independents, PNP won control of St. James, Manchester, St. Anne, Westmoreland, and St. Thomas parochial boards. Upshot of this was that there was now a distinct confidence within the party that it was on the way to winning the next general elections in 1954. With this in mind, speculations began to mount as to the potential makeup of a future PNP government and the influence within it of different factions. At the party's annual conference of October 1951, evidence was given of the left's popularity among PNP delegates. Not only did Ken Hill retain his position as second vice president, but two leaders associated with the left, Richard Hart and Frank Hill, received the highest and second highest number of votes, respectively, among the 25 members elected to the General Council. The next most popular of those elected were Leecroft Robinson and Edith Dalton James, comrades not associated with either left or right. Should you remember that at this time, a future cabinet would consist of only 8 members. If the conference vote were taken as a guide, the leading candidates for ministerial positions would have been Norman Manley, Will Nethersold, Ken Hill, Richard Hart, Frank Hill, Leecroft Robinson, Edith Dalton James. That makes 7. According to the Gleaner, right wing felt that the left had taken over the party. Scarcely a month would elapse before the right's discontent took tangible form. On the 20th of November 1951, it was announced that a new trade union was about to be set up, its first members being workers on the new bauxite alumina plant at Shooter's Hill in Manchester. This announcement was made by Tossie Kelly and W.R. McPherson, both of whom had been sent to the bauxite works as paid organizers for the TUC. Immediate response of the PNP's executive committee was to order these men to cease their activities or face charges of breaching parties. Charges were drawn up against Kelly and McPherson. In response, right-wing parliamentarians and party luminaries sent a threatening letter to the party executive. Nevertheless, a trial committee was appointed to try Kelly and McPherson. Ken Hill outlined the charges against Kelly and McPherson, and the executive appointed a trial committee of Manley, Nethersold, Arnett, and Reverend Dick. A 5th nominee declined to serve. Right, and an ace, Steve. This was a document entitled Trade Union 34, which the letter writers produced and which had the effect of completely reversing the roles of the main protagonists. The accusers, Ken Hill and his TUC comrades, suddenly becoming the main accused. The document in question had been written by Dr. David Lewis and Mrs. Pearl Lewis, a couple originally from New Zealand, who had become members of the British Communist Party. In the brief period while Dr. Lewis was the medical officer at Port Royal between 1947 and 1948, Couples had been active in the Port Royal Group and the TUC Education Department. The offending section of the document was that prepared for session 4 of a proposed 4-part political education course. Only occasion on which the document's contents have been used, according to Arthur Henry, was in a 1947 study course that conducted in Almond Town. And he had only used material for sessions 1 and 2. But that was a difficult time then. Regardless of the fact that this was a 5-year-old document, and whether or not it had been used, gave the appearance of being an anti-PNP document, stating without equivocation that only real political parties of workers must be Marxist communist parties. Worse, authors who had prepared the document for use in a TUC course were members of a communist party, thus totally undermining Manley's 12-year-old defense of the PNP's letter, publicly stated in May 1948 that there is no group or individual within the party who is directly or indirectly connected with any communist movement or organization anywhere in the world. First of all, Gleaner made it known that it had received a copy of the document, and it was clear that it was withholding publication only as a further measure of blackmail against man. Trial committee met for several weeks, and instead of vigorously pursuing the original charges against Kelly and McPherson, concentrated on the counter charges against the TUC leaders, marshaled by the young barrister Vivian Blake. End of its hearings, tribunal published its findings, most important of which was that we find that between 1947 and 1948, a secret Marxist communist group was set up inside the party with the intention of maintaining common policies and action in relation to Marxist activities, and that the leaders therein were Frank Hill, Ken Hill, Richard Hart, and Arthur Henry. Recommendation in the report were: A, that the principals in the actions we condemn be asked to resign from the party, namely Ken Hill, Frank Hill, Richard Hart, and Arthur Henry. B, the lesser figures involved in the Marxist group, namely Grubb, Dice, Edwards, and Gordon, all of whom except Gordon are members of the council or members of the executive, be asked to resign their offices and make written declarations of apology and reaffirmation of party law, in which they be asked to resign from the party. C, that the relationship between the TUC and the party in future be dealt with at a special party conference, which will be mentioned below. D, the executive be dissolved for the time being by order of the council, and the president of the party be authorized to appoint a special committee to direct party affairs until the special conference has been held. On the 2nd of March, 1952, the report was taken to the General Council, which accepted it by a 23-12. It also accepted the proposal to call a special conference and set the date for 29 March. The special conference was to be held at the Ward Theatre over 2 days, 29 and 30th of March, 1952. Arrangements for the date were carefully outlined by the party General Secretary Vernon Arnett in a letter to the party groups on the 19th of March. The time allotted is 6.5 hours. That is from 2:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. on the 29th, and from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on the 30th. 1.5 hours will be allotted to the persons opening on behalf of the General Council, 3.5 hours to the persons named in the recommendations, 1 hour for speeches from delegates, 15 minutes for a closing speech on behalf of the person's name, and 15 minutes for a closing speech of the general council. The conference, there was a total of 266 votes. Again, at the conference, there was a total of 206 votes cast by accredited delegates. The total attendance, however, was estimated at 1,500. Moreover, based on the reaction from the audience compared to the eventual vote, there seems to have been a marked difference in views between the accredited delegates and the non-accredited comrades. The defendants claim this was because many of the groups supporting them were disenfranchised by the party secretary. First of the defendants to respond to the General Council's findings and recommendations was Richard Hall.
Text of the speech Richard had to a special PNP conference at Ward Theatre on Saturday, the 29th of March, 1952. The great majority of those with whom my comrades and I have been associated in political and trade union activities over a number of years, who have formed the impression that we are sincere, honest, and hardworking, have been profoundly disturbed at what has happened in the PNP, that the prospect that persons who have made the sacrifices we have made may be hounded out of party's life. There is also great confusion in the minds of tens of thousands who love us as to what is behind this issue. By this time, everyone in Jamaica has gathered that the 4 H's, those who are now being branded communists with us, are on the left. And that Isaacs, Lloyd, Sebright, Glasspool, and others are on the right. But what these terms mean and what the issues are which seem to divide us are still a source of bewilderment for a great many people, particularly in rural areas. Unfortunately, tribunals report the president's message urging support for its recommendations, which have been circulated far and wide, throw no light on these matters. And many persons who have received these lengthy and erudite documents cannot avoid the conclusion that something is behind a legalistic screen. So let us first get our definitions clear. The terms left and right date back to the French Revolution, 1789, after the overthrow of the feudal monarchy and the landed aristocracy and the setting up of the revolutionary parliament. The representatives were seated in a semicircle around the chairman. Deputies who represented parties of the common people seated themselves on the left, and those who represented the wealthy and property classes seated themselves on the right. The PNP has always had both left wing and right wing. This has been possible because we are a national movement, uniting those classes which, despite certain differences, hold one thing in common: their desire for self-government. Of course, the biggest capitalists are mostly in alliance with imperialism and against self-government. But some capitalists and merchants are not against self-government. And we in Jamaica have tried to build a national movement in which both workers and small and medium-sized employers have a place within one and the same party, despite the differences that arise And we have assigned to the president the admittedly difficult task of remaining in the center and keeping the inevitable friction which arises from time to time between left and right within bounds. We have asked him, despite the difficulties, to lead a united party containing both left and right, and for him to be the national leader. And the thing to remember is that despite the differences between left and right, it has worked. Now and then the differences between left and right is very clearly demonstrated. For example, when the minimum wage board was fixing the minimum wage for the bakery trade, the representative of the workers, the TUC, was Ken Hill, now PNP mayor of the KSAC. The representatives of the employers, the Master Bakers Association, was William Sipran, now PNP deputy mayor. There you saw clearly left and right, but they were both nationalists and both good PNP members. And the point is that for years we have proved that a party like this can work. It has passed and it would work in the future. It would be wrong to pretend that there will not come a time when the strains will become very great. The party program today contains only a bare minimum of public ownership. Electricity, radio, telephone, the bus services in the city and suburbs. But it is natural that after the achievement of self-government, the working people would demand that being nominally a socialist party, the PNP should advance its program to include more public ownership. And generally speaking, the left would be in favor of more public ownership and the right would be against it. Let us take two simple examples. A proposal to extend our demand for public ownership of city bus transport to a demand for public ownership of the main country bus services would involve taking over the enterprise bus service. Harry Days, nationalist though he may be, has his money invested in this company. Right away, an area of conflict is opened up between the left and right. B, one of the principal causes of the high cost of living is the fabulous profits made by merchants on the wholesale cloth and dry goods trade. A proposal to hand over the wholesale importation of cloth to a non-profit cooperative organization or a government agency so as to bring down the cost of living would mean putting Wills Isaacs out of business. Another area. It is of course obvious that persons whose private ownership of certain industries may have to be disturbed by socialists for the common good would readily find remunerative employment in nationalized industries in which they had worked, where their experience and talents would be of value. Unfortunately, it is true that such alternative avenues of service are not always appreciated. But despite the differences between the left and the right, which are inevitable, which are more acute after self-government is achieved, it is believed of those whose future in the party is now at stake that we will be able to continue a united party, and that Manly can and should be called upon by this Congress to continue to occupy a central position and to lead a party containing both left and right. What is more, my comrades and I believe that the splitting of the party by the expulsion of the left leadership at this time will irreparably damage our hopes of the early achievement of self-government and perpetuate in power those who uphold imperialism. It is now of great importance for us to find out what is behind this issue. The first thing to be appreciated is that Kelly's and McPherson's resignation from the TUC and formation of a rival union had nothing to do with the notorious study course document or with the alleged existence of a secret Marxist group. This is admitted in the tribunal's report, which even goes so far as to say that their resignation was unjustified. The document was only produced at the later stage, and at the time its existence was admitted to have been unknown to the right. The second point of importance is that the right-wing support of Kelly and McPherson and their threat to split the party also had nothing to do with the document or the alleged Marxist conspiracy. Kelly and McPherson had, of course, made all their preparations in advance for their move to form a new union. They had an office, furniture, transportation, and LST, all well secured in advance. It is well known that personally, they did not have a brass heart in between them. It came out in Ken Hill's cross-examination period that McPherson had made arrangements for a telephone for the NLC before the 26th of November, 1951. And in the cross-examination of McPherson, that Kenny paid £20 in advance to secure the NLC office. Both of them admitted that they were assisted financially to equip the NLC office by members of the PNP. Ken Hill was not allowed by the president to get names of the PNP members who were financing it on the ground that it would incriminate these persons. Members will have no difficulty in identifying sympathies. On December 3, 1951, it is recorded in the tribunal report that two prominent leaders of the right, one of whom, Willis Isaacs, had hurriedly returned from America on December 1st, called on the president, and I quote, informed him that they had other prominent members of the party with them, and they decided that Kelly and McPherson were not to be charged as members of the party for anything that they did in relation to the TUC, and said that any attempt by the executive of the party to inquire into such charges as might be laid against Kelly and McPherson would result in serious consequences. On December 6th, this was allowed, but this was followed by a written threat signed by 9 members of the right, headed by Lloyd Isaacs. Observe the dates. PNP members helping to finance the penniless Kelly and McPherson to form a new union to split the TUC, contrary to the PNP's policy at the time of support for the PNP in November. The right-wing leadership defies the party executive and threatens serious consequences if traitors are tried on December 3rd. But as the tribunal itself showed, not until December 18, or at most a couple days earlier, did anybody on the right know of the document? It is clearly beyond dispute that the document had nothing whatsoever to do with the right's decision to bring down, showdown. The document, which came afterwards, was nothing more than a means of blackmailing the president, in siding with them in their efforts to expel the left. Once unearthed, the document was copied and placed in the hands of the cleaner, as the president's speech confirmed. It has long been the practice of Isaacs and Glassford to disclose the most confidential decisions of the party executive to the Gleaner's political reporter. A political pistol is placed at the leader's head. Expel the left, or we will go and give you the greatest red smearing you and the party have ever known, with the entire press, from the Gleaner to public opinion, on our side. The document is, of course, now a matter of importance in the issue before us. It must never be lost sight that the revolt of the right came before the existence known to them. They had already decided on a shooting. And Isaacs and Lloyd, at least, possibly certain others, had already decided that they would split if they did not gain their end. So let us therefore consider what it was that put the right wing, or a section of it, in this desperate frame of mind. There have been some persons on the right who have always wanted to split, but never had sufficient influence. Fairclough has always been quite frank about it. Reverend Baker, time of the WFTU issue, 1949, made it plain that in his view, the 4 H's and also Will's Isaacs, whom he termed wild men, should be put out of the party in order to make the party acceptable to persons he considered desirable among the agriculturists. Glassford and Isaacs, on the other hand, have long suffered from jealousy, even an envy of Ken Hill, which has made them develop a personal hatred which knows no bounds. Isaac's activity in endeavoring to enlist the aid of police officers against the left was fully exposed in the evidence of Superintendents Long and Keeley at a recent commission of inquiry into the police force. But these persons were not able to gather any real support or find any issue on which to lead the right to a showdown. And in any event, the personal jealousies and feelings which divided them made cooperation difficult. However, a historical process has been taking place in Jamaica, which has thrown the strange bedfellows together. And it is to an analysis of this that I must now draw your attention. When our national movement started, it is a historical fact that the vast majority of the workers did not participate. They were kept out of the national movement by Bustamante, whom they followed blindly and unquestioningly, and who, of course, opposed our agitation for self-government, telling them that it would mean brown man rule. This was, of course, an entirely artificial situation, because by far the largest category in our population is the wage earning and unemployed wage earners group, which comprises nearly 70% of the total. In other West Indian islands, for example, the Leeward Islands, the national movement had from the start been, in fact, the labor movement, in Jamaica, of course, there are other categories besides wage earners who have an important role in the national movement. But the fact is that because of Bustamante, the majority of workers employed and unemployed were at first kept out of it. And the relative influence of those who represent the working in our was correspondingly less important than it would have been if Bustamante's movement had not existed to lure the workers away. Of course, the left leaders were never unimportant, but our importance in those early years was that we worked harder, were prepared to make more sacrifices, and were able to get some sort of hearing in the West and other areas where others in our national would not or could not go to preach our national message. But it has been obvious in recent years that that position was changing rapidly as the TUC grew in strength and greater numbers of workers came over from Bustamante to our banner. A change in the very composition of the national movement was rapidly taking place. And with every passing year, Bustamante's decline on the one hand brought thousands of new working class recruits to us on the other. And the important thing to appreciate this process is that it manifested itself dramatically in the election of our own working class, Ken Hill, as mayor of our capital in 1951. It also manifested itself in the elections to our party executive in 1951, where 10 out of the 21 members were members of the TUC. But what many do not realize is that these very indices of the growing importance of the working class in the national movement were also a guarantee that our party was now capable for the first time of winning a resounding electoral victory. The people could now trust us, and the TUC's record of struggle for the workers was the final answer to the fear that self-government means brown man rule. The tragedy of our party is that our right wing has been unwilling to allow this change in the relative strength of the social strata within our national to take place. Rather than see this historical process unfold, they have resolved to bring down in ruins the edifice which we have built with so much effort and sacrifice. The first came the scheme to change the construction of the party so as to reduce the number of TUC members who could be elected to the leadership. That plan, which was plausibly presented, did not succeed. Then came a conspiracy among members of the House of Representatives to defy the party executive, put the parliamentary group above the party executive, and boycott attendance at executive meetings. Then came the opportunity to make use of the treachery of two TUC officers to try to split the TUC, to divide and rule. This explains the tender concern of the right wing for Kelly and Macpherson's right to remain in the PNP while fighting against the TUC. Here let me say that I believe that Glasspool was only waiting for their right to do this to be established, so that he could go over to them without losing his PNP status. may be true that Kelly and Macpherson moved precipitately. And seeing his prospects of leaving the Union fading, Glasspool made a last-minute effort to get them to hold their hands. But of his intention to desert the team, especially when his own supporters had left, I personally have no doubt. This somewhat ironical twist of fate that the NLC have now discovered that Glasspool is so unpopular. They would now not accept you. Faced with this right-wing revolt in support of Kelly and Macpherson, and in the hope that when the treachery and incompetence of these would-be trade union leaders had been exposed, the revolt would fizzle out and things would return to normal, the PNP executive set up its tribunal and agreed to hear, in addition to the charges against the traitors, any grievances that the right wing might wish to air. It is possible that up to this stage, the right wing would settle for the right to establish a rival trade union within the PNP, so as to keep the workers divided and weak, and thereby re-establish their position. But after the exhumation from the grave of this study course, which everyone had forgotten since its stillbirth in December 1947 or January 1940, the right wing decided on an all-out smear campaign. The study course enabled them to raise their price. Nothing else would satisfy them than the complete ouster of the left. Be that as it may, the course document was dug up by Macpherson, and the right wing now had a trump card in it. Copies were made, and it was given to the press. Web of conspiracy and intrigue invented by Macpherson and Kelly, no doubt with assistance from others, now had a document fortified. Isaacs and Lloyd knew there would be no compromise as far as they were concerned. Manley had to make a vital decision. Throughout all the long sessions of the tribunal, he knew that it was a choice of the most far-reaching significance that would have to be made. For if the left were not expelled, Isaacs and Lloyd, certain others, would go. And the red smear, based on the document, embellished by lurid tales of cloak and dagger conspiracy, would fill the pages of the Gleaner and echo over the radio for years to come. I have no doubt this must have been an agonizing mistake. I have no doubt that the president must have spent many sleepless nights while he considered what he should do. I am prepared to concede that he made his decision in this agonized frame of mind in a way which he considered best for the country from his point of view. But I am equally convinced that it was a political decision, a decision dictated by what he then thought best, in the sense that of the two possible alternatives he considered, it was the lesser evil to dispense with the left, whose popularity he underrated. For on that basis alone, could he have gone on to convince himself that the evidence of Kelly and Macpherson could be accepted. I am also convinced that this decision has been one of the greatest mistakes that any person saddled with such great responsibilities has ever made. Certain points stand out very stubbornly, despite all the skill of legal craftsmanship which has been employed in the preparation of the tribunal. It's my duty to draw attention to them, and I shall do so as briefly as possible. The tribunal's important findings can be summarized as follows. A, that through the study course document, lessons 3 and 4, prepared and issued with the knowledge and approval of the 4 H's, Henry taught that only a communist party means the workers any good, and that the workers would have to leave the PFP and form a communist party at some state of the movement for freedom, prior to which the working class may be a part of a general national party like the PNP. E, that the 4 H's, the other 4 persons named and others, formed a secret organization within the PNP to which they were bound by discipline, which was working to disrupt the PNP in accordance with A. The evidence relied on in respect of both these findings is entirely that of Kelly and Macpherson. Let us deal with the study course document. It is accepted that the document exists and that lessons 4, in it, the thesis mentioned is expounded. It is now accepted on all sides that the course was prepared by Dr. Lewis and or Dr. and Mrs. Lewis. The Lewises are members of the British Communist Party, and as the evidence has shown, they thought there should be a Communist Party here. But it was necessary for the purposes of the right that the 4 H's should be connected with the preparation and use of the courses. It was not difficult to connect Arthur Henry because he led a study class in Almond Town on lessons 1 and 2, which Macpherson and others attended. And all Macpherson had to do was to say that Henry had used and handed out not only lessons 1 and 2, which are inoffensive, but also 3 and 4. But the business of connecting the others with it was more difficult. Bear this in mind, that what the right wing wanted was a clean sweep, and it was therefore essential from their point of view that a link to connect us should be forged, and forged it was. The first idea was to attribute the authorship of the study course to me. My interest in workers' education was well known. I am an education officer of the TUC. I have prepared and published study courses, and of course my Marxist views are well known, and I am proud of them. I was the logical victim. So Macpherson gave evidence first and said that I had prepared the course and had it typed on the stencils. And he even purported to remember a conversation with Henry when he said more copies were needed, and Henry agreed to speak to me about the proposed alterations. But unfortunately for Macpherson, the allegation that I was the author did not stick. I was not present. But Ken Hill tells you that when he ridiculed the suggestion that I was the author, Manley commented that it clearly was not written in my style. Observe that this was their first witness. So by the time Kelly came to give his evidence, the story had been changed. Kelly admitted what he must have known all along, that the Lewis is prepared. There is nothing strange in Kelly knowing this. Even if he had not known before, he could not fail to put 2 and 2 together after the cross-examination of McPherson. But, he says, he knew all along, and he admits what everyone knows, that he was very friendly with Mrs. Lewis. The evidence linking Frank Hill with the document is a single statement by Kelly, which, according to Arnett's note of his evidence, reads: Hart, Frank, and Henry were to vet this before it came before the whole class for approval, which it finally did. But in fact, Frank Hill had never seen the document until it went to the tribunal. If I had not kept it on file, no one on our side would have been able to see it at all, from the time it became news until it was produced at the tribunal. The article based on lessons 1 and 2 published in Frank Hill's paper in January was written by Arthur Henry. And he didn't even see these lessons, let alone lessons 3 and 4. There is no evidence connecting Ken Hill with the document, but for his own statement that he saw it and agreed with him that it was not suitable for use. And so there is no evidence. McPherson alone says that he saw Henry printing the course in the TUC office on a machine which there is abundant evidence to show had broken down and been scrapped long before. As against this, Henry says that Lewis had printed it and brought it to him, already done. He does not know where, but it could not have been in the TUC office. If I am to hazard a guess where it was done, my bet would be in the garrison office. They don't know. That possibility was drawn to the tribunal's attention. Well, the president in his speech suggested that the circular issued in connection with the Alban Town class was printed in the TUC office. I must remind you that was not suggested in his evidence. Henry said that the machine in the TUC office, having been scrapped after the 1946 Congress, he had to get his circulars printed on the PNP's machine. But even if anyone wanted to believe the worst possible about the document and to accept a part of the evidence of these two witnesses, despite the lies they have taught themselves, it is clear, as Arthur Henry himself pointed out, that all the persons named, only he could possibly be called upon to answer the charges in connection with the document. And he has answered. McPherson gave one final piece of evidence in connection with the document, which is the most interesting of all. He said that he attended an education conference called by me at Eloise Park in 1950. He gave the wrong date. But the other evidence he gave as to some of the persons present and the discussion of arrangements for a course of lectures by Mr. Heath clearly identified as a conference called by me to found the TUC Education Department. He said that at this conference, I had said that persons present should go to Mr. Heath's lecture and draw him out by asking questions from the study course document, to which presumably he would give answers in the document. Now it so happened that not only were Messrs. Blake, Beecroft Robinson, and Heath at this conference, as shown by my records, but I also have a stenographic record of everything that took place and a précis of what everyone said, made by a young lady who acted as a secretary. My file was placed before the trial. My person was proved to be a complete liar. But his object in telling this lie is obvious: to tie the final knot in implicating me and the TUC Education Department with the document. Now, here is what is so important about this evidence. It finally disposes of the possibility of relying on a word of evidence from these men. And the remarkable thing is that the tribunal's report does not mention this matter at all. I can understand why. It would upset the apple cart. For no judge hearing this evidence could rely on the word these discredited men have given and be able to condemn men with the record of service and integrity that we have enjoyed for 14 years and more in our country's public life. The charge concerning the secret discipline group seems to have been upheld by the tribunal on the basis of A, McPherson's evidence about the master plan to make Ken Hill president of the PNP instead of Manley, and to dock the country with Marxist views. B, the gun-swearing evidence of McPherson. C, the evidence of secret meetings by Kelly. Let us first see how the master plan is supposed to be prepared. One would have expected the master plan to be prepared by Ken Hill, or at least one of the four ancients. But no, McPherson said that in February 1948, apparently within 3 or 4 months of his first introduction to Marxism, he and Edwards, then a new recruit who had just joined the alleged group in the same month, were entrusted with the drafting of the plan. They prepared, circulated to their alleged penal conspiracy. After discussion, it was decided to submit copies to Ken Hill and Frankie in Montego. Hart also saw it, he said. Ken Hill is then supposed to have approved it, endorsing in his own sweet hand at the end with the words, "Very good." Where is this master plan? This document, which was typed and retyped and circulated. McPherson regrets he cannot find it. He cannot find it. Because it never existed. He had a copy of the study course, which did exist. But he could not produce the master plan because there never was. The gun swearing allegation supposed to have taken place in 1947 is the most fantastic fairy tale you or I have ever heard. But it is a good smearing point. The old stock smearing, the smear of atheism, and it will serve well in the future those who have already decided to smear us. The tribunal has decided to accept this fairy tale. Glassford is supposed to have been told of this incident by Macpherson in 1949. If this were true, why did not Glassford at least make a confidential report of so serious a matter to Manley? And remember, Glassford had good reason in 1949 to want to score points over the left if he could. I refer to the WFTU issue. But what they did not mention in the report is that Macpherson said that 6 persons were present beside himself. 5 of these persons gave evidence that no such thing took place. The 6th man, Gerald Grant, also denies that any such thing took place. And so it is the word of one true liar, Macpherson, against 6 men who have a record of service in our movement. Finally, there is Kelly's evidence of secret meetings. Kelly says the Lewises formed a secret group consisting of the 4-H's and himself to propagate Marxism. This was, according to him, the only function of the group from 1946 to January 1948. But when asked what Marxism was, Kelly didn't know. He doesn't know. Although he was a member of this group, supposed to be studying Marxism, passing on study courses, propagating Marxism from 1946 to 1948, January, he never found out what Marxism. In 1948, says Kelly, on the eve of their departure for India, the Lewises convened a meeting at which it was agreed that a disciplined group would be formed. From then on, until early 1950, we are condemned on the word of this traitor alone to believe that we, who have been engaged in making Manley the father of the nation, were working to discredit him. That we, who have brought the love of tens of thousands of workers to the party, were engaged in planning its destruction. I am satisfied that there is nothing about any of the 4 agents, the other 4 persons named, that Manley did not know before the production of the document. I am satisfied that the propaganda about communists, which is now being peddled around, on the basis of the tribunal's report means only that for political reasons, a new definition is being given to the word communist, which was not the definition used when the PNP executive made its declaration in 1940 that there were no persons in the PNP who were communists. A communist was then defined as being a person holding a membership in or subject to the discipline of any communist organization. And this new definition has been coldly and calculatingly applied for the purpose of a smear campaign and a witch hunt. We who have stood up to persecution and imprisonment in the past are prepared to suffer whatever may come in the future. And those frightened men who in their imagination see war just around the corner may have the satisfaction of knowing that if war comes and the Americans are seeking victims in the West Indies, they may ensure the safety of their skins by pointing at us. Oh, their consciences will be mercy. If these recommendations of the tribunal are accepted, it will cause such a weakening of our national movement as will destroy the possibility of the early achievement of self-government, which is now almost within our grasp. The urgent task of the hour is that Manley should be forced to put his pride aside, to rectify the error he has made, to pledge that he will abide by the obvious wishes of the people and continue to lead a party containing both left and right, allowing those who wish to disrupt that unity to go their way into the bosom of the cleaner and all that it represents. We are not fools. We are not naive enough to believe that he can become a working class leader. We are not unaware of his legal and business connection. But we believe that he has sufficient stature to take an independent stand if it so resolves. Manley had misunderstood his popularity. It has never been the same as Bustamante. Blind personal loyalty. His popularity is symbolic. Symbolic of the unity of the social strata that make up our national movement. It contains within itself the popularity of all. If Manley cuts off Ken Hill, by that act, he cuts off a part of himself, a very large part. That is already apparent. That he should realize this, place personal pride aside, and reestablish the unity of the national movement is the decision history calls on him to make. Another thing I wish to place before him, the example of the great leader of the national movement today in the land whence the ancestors of the great majority of our people. In January of this year, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Prime Minister and leader of the national movement of the Gold Coast or Ghana, West Africa, was faced with a similar right-wing revolt in the Convention People's Party, their equivalent of the PNP. This is what he said. I know for certain that last week at a meeting in Accra, held by a group of bourgeois nationalists and professional aristocrats, a plot was hatched to sabotage every effort of the Convention People's Party, break the Popular Front, and ruin the struggle for the liberation of Ghana. They have planned to do everything to confuse the masses and employ the old discredited imperialist tactic of divide and rule. That is, infiltrating into the camp of the party and using some of the party members as saboteurs to achieve their end. In this, they have been in league with certain shiftless editors to carry out their grafting and laying schemes. I assure them that we are firm and the masses are behind the CPP. The masses know what we want and who should lead them. Their vile propaganda will fall on stony ground. Come to the north. I commend this example to the President of the PNP. This is the road by which he and the PNP can lead our nation forward to victory. The other course she has embarked upon of expelling the left wing, which represents the working class, is one which, if pursued, history will never forget or following is a postscript. This would have been after. Postscript to the PNP. It is an unpleasant duty to report that the methods by which the majority vote in favor of the tribunal's recommendations obtained the special PNP conference cannot be regarded as reflecting a fair decision of the membership of the party. A number of groups which have paid their financial obligations in accordance with the practice of previous years complained that they were not permitted to see delegates. This, the PNP secretary sought to justify by reference to a rule in the PNP constitution, under which long-established groups, though actually functioning, can be regarded as in abeyance, even though they are financial, on the group that their arrears of dues were paid too late. Such a group would then have to start all over again with provisional status for a number of months. Under such a rule, which had not been invoked before, one group would have no opportunity of knowing whether another's arrears had been paid up late or on time. Not unnaturally, this caused much discontent and suspicion. Allegations of discrimination have been made. And indeed, had the numbers of delegates present from constituency not been withheld, an abnormally large number of groups from East and St. Andrew, Mr. Manley's constituency, would have been disclosed as being represented. In advance of the conference, a message from the president urging support of the tribunal's report was printed in 10,000 copies and circulated free throughout the island with copies of the report. No opportunity was given to the persons accused to state their reply. It is also worthy of note that over 60 delegates were mandated to vote in favor of the report in advance of the conference. These mandates having been secured following visits to the constituencies by PNP president and secretary. Finally, Mr. Manley refused to withdraw this widely publicized threat to resign if the tribunal's report was not accepted, and would not accept Ken Hill's challenge to allow a free vote by declaring that he would abide by the will of the majority, remain at his post. So, in all these circumstances, vote of 111 to 68 against the compromise amendment. The final vote, 128 for, 75 against on the substantive motion, speaks for itself. Public was excluded from the comment. Nevertheless, the majority of those present, counting both delegates recognized and those not recognized, who were allowed to attend only as observers, was vigorous, opposed to the tribunal's recommendation. But the majority had the rule. Being decided on the course to be followed, leadership is taking no chance. The reaction of the masses on the street was immediate. Vast crowds turned out to support the TUC. For several weeks, the PNP remnant could not get a hearing on the streets in Kingston or in West or Central Zimbabwe, and did not dare to venture into the working class residential districts. The immediate beneficiary was, of course, Buster Manley, whose political decline, which had been proceeding rapidly, was immediately checked. Large numbers of fringe supporters who had left him since 19 immediately returned to his fold. But there were tens of thousands ready to go forward immediately with the expelled TUC leaders to the formation of a new national party who clamored for action. Alas, because the TUC president insisted that if it were formed too soon, Mr. Manley would be able to smear it successfully, no new party was formed. It was not until July 27th that the TUC, at the TUC's annual Congress, passed a resolution demanding the formation of a new national party and voted over the opposition of the TUC President Ken Hill to set a time of 6 weeks within which the TUC executive was instructed to take the necessary steps to convene its convening.
On the motion to accept the report, the vote was 128 for, 78 against. The other item on the agenda, the future relations between the PNP and the TUC, was abandoned in the general atmosphere of confusion, vindication, anger, gloom, and disorientation exuded by the Congress. Ken Campbell's reaction captures the atmosphere for us. I walked downstairs for the exit while looking at the platform, which was now a very forlorn sight. We were now moving towards the large door. And as I got out, I saw some people carrying Ken Hill on their shoulders and heading for the park. It seemed as if the entire conference was following them. A woman came out of the theater with a folding wooden stool, which she apparently used as a seat in the standing room only area during the conference. He looked up towards the sky, took her head slowly, and then suddenly smashed the spoon to bits at the side of it. Her own unrecognizable face, and so walked away from the scene. It was said later that those on the platform, including NW, were escorted from the building to the back door. Obviously, I was not there.
So I want to thank all who attended, those online. Alvin, you did a fantastic job. And most at times I even thought I was actually listening, Richard Hart himself. I was moved by Richard Hart, you know, presentation. So really was a fantastic. When we met with Richard in 1998, small group of us, he said what happened is that at every conference before, groups were allowed to come and pay at the time of the conference, get their living time. You can imagine the transportation situation for rural groups to send their money. No bank home, etc. So they just tell the general secretary not to pay, but I couldn't get it. And he said, but we them who read the Constitution, all the writing groups had already paid their subscription. So they changed a contract without telling the entire party to say, as of this year, all groups have to be paid for by a particular. Then insisted on the Constitution. I don't know if the conference ended with the city of Jamaica. But it ended, and as you can see, it just come out as the conference fine. Unfortunately, we don't have a copy of 30. They have more people who are young. Right? Or are young in that level. I think they are. So we don't have. So I want to thank everybody again. Pardon?
Questions?
Really. And you have the right to take it. Comment Monday, please go ahead.
I guess I'm just saying, not what you're-
No, I would say one or two comments about the day. One or two comments also. Anybody?
Yes. I was asking you, the fact that there was no picture after the movement, I was asking, there was no camera, but.
There would have been what happened. But we couldn't find any mechanism. And that has been so far, number of things. Right? So really want to thank everybody.
You have one comment. Yeah. And what fascinated me was the pattern of behavior, then the continuing pattern.
No.
So maybe. It's for national movement. If you see the old bureau. You notice then nobody talked about the center, you know,
There was a big sickness.
I'm just saying, I'm fascinated that I didn't hear it come up. And there was a big center, as a matter of fact, when I met him and is that the ongoing things, no, I'm not even, the ongoing things they had an exceptional relation, right? Even the government was sending things to home office for home, but the point is that he always urged to get rid of the communists. That's really almost all every drink that was what he was saying. And the quotation of that, he said, he could not be. What would run the country is sometimes sleepy center. That's another fact.
Very interesting. Frank Gordon brought back in 1973, then a Jamal team officer, era Vincent Grove, who gave his membership.
Long before Grove ran to the PNP in 1959.
Years long before, Ken Hill came back in, ran the local government under Michael Manley.
Dice had come back in, was on the executive when I started here in 68.
Ken Hill became deputy mayor then in the 70s. So
69.
69, and Richard had in his subsequent writing said that Michael invited him to rejoin the party, but he was already a member of the PJ, and he could not at that time take up membership, and that he was only the PJ collapsed, and he was reinvited, and he took up. I'm saying that they came back in that PFP still remain.
Yeah.
Well, certainly in the 70s, when PFP reaffirmed democratic socialism in November 1974, and some came back before, but a lot of the individuals that look at the people's national party. I mean, I have been purged too. I was convinced by Louis Maxwell, and the real food, that this was the real deal, that this was the real thing that I should come back into the people's national party and come back. Yeah.
It sounded very much as a cool.
Hold on. Depends on and Scott did. Stop this here.
There's some subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounded very much as if it was a coup, especially with what Richard said that Nkrumah had said was taking place in Ghana. One is reminded nowadays of the color revolution that's taking place in different parts of Europe. And some people are even saying that what's happening in Israel right now is because the Israeli government has not been supporting Ukraine and is being friendly towards China, etc. Right? So, I think for me, this just seemed like an international conspiracy to keep the nationalist movement down, which was happening in Jamaica and happening in Ghana.
Well, of course, what we didn't say, what Paul Burke insisted that I not be given enough time to say, was that this was during the period of what was called the Cold War. Let us remember that the Soviet Union, which was generally called Russia, was an ally of Britain and the United States in the war against Germany from up to 1945. Yet by 1949, they were talking about splitting insisting on splitting the trade union, international trade union movement, and pulling out from the World Federation of Trade Unions that had Soviet Union as a member, that former Nazis by 1949 were running the German government.
Yeah.
With the assistance of the British, the French, and the Americans. So that meant that little Jamaica, obviously, Manley at least thought so, could not act without thinking about the United States, which even if we were an independent and if we had gone to self-government at the time, it was the United States we would know how to look at in terms of who was carrying the big stick. You know, so as Richard Hart says in his speech and puts out specifically in his book, that Manley clearly took a political decision. The so-called the tribunal and the decision of the tribunal had nothing to do with evidence, but had to do with how the leader of the party at that time saw the political prospects for the PNP and whether it could proceed and win an election without throwing out the leaders of the so-called of the left. And he took the decision that he didn't think it was possible. Richard Hart says, well, I think you're wrong.
I'm going to tell you a little bit more than that. He said the political pistol was put at Manley's head to say, we will go to the Green House, we will go to the Ouster, we will say that you are leading a communist party. And Manley could not deal with that in terms and still made us sneaker now, but communism was seen as anti-white, anti-religion, anti-democracy, anti-private ownership. So the word communist, or it was in 4 letters, was a very bad word in Jamaica. And among the church.
I'm stuck with the pattern in answer.
No, and it was a very bad word. So that was part of the conversation. And Leroy, we don't get to today. They said that, and I'm told Vernon, that father gave us some part of the so that he regretted in having to be part of that decision to expel the rent. Right? Wasn't that he was happy about his lawyer demanded. Demanded for that business. But he regretted that. And of course, finally, a rumor started just not before they became loaded. Don't matter. Very much as a whole thing about it. That you have very challenged non-man president, which now use the issue that are challenging the stronger.
I wanted just to say 2 things. One is that, I think we're all clear that, man is a political decision, about the implications of trying to connect. If you look at what occurred later, in another generation, in terms of policies and that, but, he made it correct decision. I mean, that's what I'm looking at, based on a similar sector that was mounted and the backlash and what happened after that. Yes, with the other man. That's all.
A younger man should have said that.
No. I saw. No. I'm saying that the analysis that Norman was absolutely correct. Yeah, absolutely correct. And he was faced with the honor. He wanted to take that. The younger man, maybe younger, with, and the young is supposed to be more adventurous and more courageous. So the courageous and we follow that. Yeah. You are right with that in a way. the impact on the party was the same. But the most important thing for me is the resilience of the people. Yeah, it's really the resilience. And I think we have to look at it because we also have to look at not just what happened, but how we were able to rebuild and to come back together and keep that. And to keep that going. As well said, I agree with her. But we know it's a spiral, right? Yes. And we have seen that. But I don't know if we've done the kind of reflection and discussion around that. So really pull all the lessons learned.
That's right.
And how, that's how we do. And how we make use of those lessons. What are the lessons?
Yes.
Really allow the project to come back together.
Yes.
To find center again.
Yes.
I can't come, I wanted for.
Yeah.
What Jamaica is doing, I
I
mean,
mean, there, it's something is.
No, you're saying that is that, I don't think that's super. But I'm agreeing with you, because exactly what you said, that the left and the right. But what brought them together then was this nationalist spirit, yes, and the goal. And I don't know if we have a conscious identity. Yeah, but aspect is speaking or will.
Another thing though, or which we should, in response to Angela's thing, taking that man to be the right, not right decision.
That's my opinion.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing. All I'm saying is another bit of information that we didn't have time to put forward was that Manley tried to save the situation. He actually, a few days before the conference, had discussions with Ken Hill, where they worked out a plan. Similar to the plan that we had worked out in the 1949 situation with the WFP. You know, that what would happen was that Arthur Henry, Frank Hill, and Richard Hart would resign from the TUC. Ken Hill would remain because Ken Hill was never regarded as a communist, really. Right? Ken Hill would remain. Ken Hill would resign his seat on the party executive. But before the elections came up in 1944, he would be admitted back. Right? And then so when the time,
go to the right way.
and then when the time was right, the other 380 could be admitted back into the TUC. You understand? After the 54 election, that was a deal that we had worked out, and Ken Hill had agreed to it. That Ken Hill was the one who broke the deal.
Because
Ken Hill was the one who broke the deal. Because when Ken Hill got up to speak, unlike Richard, he did not take a measured oath. He got all worked up
you're in money.
and get very very personal, abusive speech against Glasspool and Wills Island, which Manley could not accept. Because Wills Island and Glasspool, remember, were members of the House of Representatives, leading PNP members.
And I was on.
No, we didn't mention Island. His attack was on Glasspool and Wills Island, and very personal. No, what I'm saying is that man, I'm saying what was Richard Hart's view of the situation. That Manley could not accept that Ken Hill could have blasted his two leading PNP like that. And he took Ken Hill's speech as having broken the deal that they had made a few days before. And therefore wrote to him after to say, look, there's a letter that was published by Frank Hill in Frank Hill's newspaper at the time to say, look, you almost have broken the deal. right? So it's off the table.
Yeah, but the other side to that coin, and everything is accurate, and we've got hard tells about it. It's stupid. And his refusal, even before the conference is said, look here, I'm the lead this party, regardless of what that is. So he had this leverage with Richard begs him. Don't say that you don't have to type in a report when you're planning. That is one. The second thing, I think man with Norman was sincere no matter the word, but he would not have been able to get them back. What would have happened is that the right would have consolidated, they would have controlled the executive, and man is attempt to bring back 10 years, and the other 8 would have been more than right to defeat it. And they would have blackmailed him once again, and he would have succumbed to that very same.
So basically you're saying succumb to that.
Yeah, the right being always had resources, and
This blackmail instead of unloading himself for the things, the other.
So you succumb to that.
It's still blackmail, this is like.
That is not supposed to be a sensible position, somebody succumb to that. Because how does that help with your country?
That is road.
this is the word communism. The black community. No, I am saying, put your desk back in 1952. The word communism is that Arabic word. And for the leading members of your party to go out there, it was still a very bad word in the 1970s, when people were called communists in the PNP. But in 52, it was, it was the end of things to say, I'm a communist. So it is in that context that the actual resignation letter, Leroy, was written on the 3rd of April. So there's an argument whether they were expelled or they resigned.
Well, other things said they were asked to resign,
Yes,
and they did,
on the 3rd of April.
they did accede to the request.
So I want to thank everybody. I think there are lessons to be learned. We will learn them all tonight. I don't know if there's any left, real left referred to the so that's nothing. I mean, as an organizing that individual with left thinking, unapologetically a Marxist influence politician.
Is he recording? Is he recording?
So, but there's another.
If this was all out of it, I was speaking with him.
So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Happy second.
Huh?